Thank you very much, Cairn. Minister, the Government intends to pass legislation later this quarter implementing the IORP2 directive, which is for the Institution for Occupational Retirement Provision. Your counterpart in 2004, Seamus Brennan, provided for a derogation for one-member scheme to apply when the IORP1 was being implemented that year. This was a practical solution provided for in that the IORP1 directive, which allowed one-member schemes, including self-administered pensions in Ireland, to thrive and contribute hugely to Irish society from 2004 to the present. The self-administered pension sector is an indigenous Irish sector employing over 350, and hundreds, if not thousands, more are employed indirectly through investments in Ireland. Self-administered pension holders, typical owners are employees of small SMEs, invest a large proportion of their pensions, approximately $4 billion in total assets valued in Ireland. For example, they invest their money in Irish properties, in Irish SMEs, in renewable energy and in social housing. Like in 2004, the IORP2 directive provides for the retention of a common sense and hugely beneficial derogation, which will protect Irish jobs, protect investment in Irish property, investment in Irish SMEs again, investment in renewable energy, investment in Irish social housing and much more. However, Minister, you choose not to retain this derogation which the IORP2 directive is transposed into law this year. You are choosing to put Irish SMEs out of business, to terminate Irish jobs, to cut investment in and financing of Irish SMEs, to cut investments in renewable energy and, shamefully, to cut immediate investment in Irish social housing when there was an unprecedented crisis in homelessness and social housing provision in this country, which have been graced by the nation. Why are you choosing to do this, Minister, at this time? It is beyond comprehensive. I know that the UK have specifically assessed this very issue only recently. In the UK, the Department of Works and Pensions produced an impact assessment on the 25th September 2018, which determined that schemes with less than 15 members are to be excluded from the directive completely. This is a common sense, Minister, and concords with the derogation your counterpart Seamus Brennan sensibly implemented in 2004. Where is your analysis, Minister, determining why this common sense measure that is appropriate for the UK citizens is not appropriated for Irish citizens? In my own constituency of Louth, Minister, a company called Bespoke Trustees Limited and its sister company employs 32 people in Dock and administrates approximately 1,250 self-administrated pension structures. Each one of those 1,250 people are affected by this. Their self-administered pension clients are typically owners and employees of small Irish SMEs. These SMEs are the backbone of the Irish economy, and many owners and employees want their hard-earned pensions contributions to be invested back into the Irish economy. Directly, Bespoke Trustees Limited has been responsible for numerous investment projects, which have provided much-needed funding for both social housing units in conjunction with the local council and units for housing the homeless in conjunction with the government's approved housing bodies. In both Louth and Dublin in the last 3 years, since August, one project alone, self-administered pensions have been responsible for taking 30 families off the housing list and into newly acquired social housing properties. Also, there are another project for 2019 intends to have 100 more families off the homelessness. Thank you, Minister.
Thank you, Lascan Corla. I'd like to say to the Deputy that the overarching objective of IORP's 2 directive is to facilitate the development of occupational retirement savings for every EU country. And many of the provisions contained within the directive will support positive reforms of the Irish occupational pension sector. The implementation of the directive will greatly enhance scheme governance and consumer protection of pensioners, the members and indeed future members. The value of the investments held in many of our small schemes fell substantially during the financial crisis, and this highlighted the need for stricter supervision and regulation of schemes, especially for schemes investing in unregulated markets. The Government has agreed that the provisions of IORP's 2 directive should apply to all funded occupational pension schemes, so that members of small schemes, and that includes small self-administered pension schemes, get the same protections as oversight of members of larger schemes, and that's only to ensure and safeguard their investment for the purposes of providing adequate income in their retirement years. And in this context, I think it's worth noting that the application of derogations in other EU countries is not common. And I actually think it's quite unusual that we're comparing ourselves to the example as set by the United Kingdom. Article 19 of the IORPS Directive sets out the investment rules for occupation pension schemes, and the underlying principle for capital investment is for schemes to invest in accordance with the prudent person rule and the other specific rules set out in the article. And I think it's recognised that there should be appropriate levels of investment freedom for schemes within those prudence limits, and this is reflected obviously in the rules. Assets must predominantly be invested in regulated markets, which means at least 50%, and this allows adequate scope for the investment instruments with long-term economic profile and non-listed undertakings, such as property and infrastructure. Councillor, there are approximately 100,000 single-member schemes in Ireland. The Pensions Authority advised that approximately 98% of these are already compliant with the new investment rules of IORPS 2 directive. Accordingly to the 2017 report of the Association of Pension Trustees in Ireland, the ATPI, there are 22,317 self-directed pension arrangements in Ireland, and only 7,756 of these are self-directed pension schemes. It's this small cohort of schemes that will now have to meet the standards that apply to every other occupational scheme in the country. Information from the Pensions Authority indicates that the vast majority of these schemes are already compliant with the provisions within the directive, and I think it's important to note that the small percentage of existing schemes which are not compliant with the new rules will not be obliged to change their existing investments and borrowings. Self-administered pension schemes may continue to invest in the Irish economy, including property and SMEs, but their investments must be properly diversified to avoid excessive reliance on any particular asset or group, so as to minimise the risk to the portfolio as a whole entity. Such diversification has been proven to reduce investment risk, and the new directive does not ban self-directed investment. Rather, it does not facilitate further borrowing for investments, and it limits future investment in unregulated sectors. The application, and I think this is probably the most important part of what I'm going to say, the application of the directive is prospective. It's not retrospective, so that this means that the changes that will come into effect will not affect existing investments and borrowing by schemes. And so the example that you just gave, Deputy, it's not accurate, whoever has given you that information, to say that they will be affected or that their jobs will be affected. This new directive will only impact prospectively and not retrospectively. Single-member schemes, including small self-administered pension schemes, will no longer be allowed to enter into new borrowing agreements except for short-term and liquidity purposes, and all future investments, and future being the operative word there, will have to be in accordance with the new rules of the directive. So accordingly, there's no current investment plans are impacted or jeopardised. Officials in my department, supported by the Pensions Authority, are managing the transposition process of the IORPS 2 directive, and the drafting of regulations is at an advanced stage to facilitate the transposition of Irish law in this quarter.
Deputy Fitzpatrick, you have 2 minutes.
If the directive is transposed into law, as outlined, Minister, these much-needed projects and many more like them across the country will be forced to terminate. I've seen myself the work they've done in Drogheda and in Doherty. It's fantastic work. This will take money away from providing immediate positive contributions to the housing crisis in Ireland now. I don't agree that what the government is doing is in the people's interest. If the directive is transformed as outlined, the 30-odd jobs that I've mentioned will all be lost, Minister. And I think there's no, I'm not just saying that to scaremonger people. And I think that, I think this will probably retrofit throughout the whole country. It's great to see companies and investment projects in many other parts of the country and the wider economy. Now we actually need this government now to really help us out, Minister. As I said, the Minister, there's 1,250 small investments in this local business in Dundalk. This company has worked very hard. And in fairness, the previous minister before us, Minister Brennan, realised that the Parliament in 2004, and he sorted the Parliament. And Minister, I don't think it's fair in saying that we shouldn't be looking at what happens in the UK. We do retrofit a lot of things that happen in the UK. All I'm just trying to say at the moment is a lot of this money that is being invested It's gone back out to the Irish economy. We do have serious problems with housing. We do have other serious problems there, Minister, and what they're doing is they are investing the money back into Ireland. The last thing we want to do, see, Minister, is multinational companies coming in, taking all this money and investing it outside the country, or the budget funds coming in and not distributing it fair. All I'm just saying to say, Minister, will you please have a look at it, Minister? You can actually make this decision with a stroke of a pen. This is your directive, and I really, really appreciate it if you have a look at it. Thank you.
Thanks again, Carcola. Deputy, with the height of respect here, I think the information that you have isn't accurate. And so I'm going to say again that the application of the directive is prospective. So all of the 1,250 small investment or singly managed pension schemes that you're talking about in Dundalk are entirely safe. There's no risk to the loss of the 30 jobs that you've alluded to, because none of the current practices are changing. And so the directive is only related to future investments. And so when there is a new single investment or managed scheme, a single small pension scheme that's established will have to apply to the new directives. And so it doesn't affect the investments, it doesn't affect the governance, it doesn't affect the property attachments, it doesn't affect the gold that they might have invested in. It doesn't affect them at all. The only thing that the directive will affect is newly established, singly managed schemes that will be established from the day that the directive is implied, which will be later on this quarter. And with respect, we already have multinational schemes in this country managed by multinational investment companies. And I don't see why a single managed fund should be governed any differently to a multinational. If we have pension rules in this country, they should be easily applicable to the smallest of schemes or the largest of schemes. There should be equality of governance in this country, and that's all this governance or this IORPS directive seems to do, is to set out a singular regulatory authority authority across the European Union for all managed pension funds. There shouldn't be a different, and there certainly won't be a derogation in Ireland.